Fox 5 and Hot 97 present Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers.
I'm so glad you're joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers on election issues here in New York City. I'm your host, Lisa Evers. The race for mayor is unlike any other we've ever seen before. An upstart candidate making headlines with powerful national friends and enemies. Plus, all the verbal slings and arrows between candidates are leaving voters wondering which one can bring real solutions. Affordability is the #1 issue for many New Yorkers. And for good reason. City residents pay a greater percentage of their paychecks for housing than in most other places in the country, says New York Times bestselling author Tiffany Aliche, CEO of the Budgetnista.
I want you to think to yourself, like, well, which of these candidates is going to help to alleviate my financial burden?
New Yorkers are facing rising costs of living in housing, transportation, and food sectors, making pocketbook issues a priority. Newcomer Zoran Mandani stepped in with some radical proposals for free services and clinched the Democratic Party nomination. Here's Joe Anuta, City Hall reporter for Politico.
I do think it's affordability, and I think that's why it's no surprise that Assemblyman Mandani won with the margins that he did. I think he surprised a lot of people.
While crime statistics show some categories of violent crime are at record lows, public safety is a major issue, especially on the subway. But there's more to it than just how many cops are on the streets or trains, says John Jay College police science professor and former NYPD Lieutenant Ralph Salento.
We need to get back to broken windows and cleaning up neighborhoods so that the perception is that businesses want to move in. People feel safe. And that is going to be a major undertaking. Yes, crime stats are down. How is the perception of safety in the city?
Let's take this to our panel for more. Joining me is Tiffany Aliche. She's the founder of the Budgetnista. She's also a New York Times bestselling author. Tiffany, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Lisa.
We appreciate it. Also with us is Ralph Salento. He's a professor of police science at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and a retired lieutenant commander with the NYPD detectives. Ralph, thank you so much for being with us.
Of course, Lisa.
We really appreciate it. Also with us is Joe Anuta. He's a senior reporter with Politico, and he's been covering the campaign very, very closely. Joe, great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Joe, I want to start with you on this. In terms of this campaign overall, from what we've seen so far, is it really that different from what we've seen in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, to start with, it's fairly unusual to have a general election that is this competitive in New York City. I think often you'll find in elections past that just by virtue of how many Democrats are registered compared to Republicans and independents, whoever wins the Democratic primary is often really a shoo-in for November, and these general elections are often a little sleepy. And we're certainly not seeing that this time. I think by virtue of Zoran Mandani, the assembly member who won, he is a member of the DSA, and I think, has inflamed a lot of more moderate Democrats in a way that has made this an extremely unusual election, I would say, actually. And you're seeing a lot of outside money being poured in, at least in the primary. So yeah, it's been a pretty wild ride, I would say.
Definitely, and more to come for sure. Tiffany, you focus on empowering people, especially women, to really get control of their money and handling it. One of the issues we keep hearing about for people is affordability. Everything it seems like it's going up, and they just don't really see any end in sight. What are you hearing?
Well, I mean, as far as New Yorkers are concerned, the two main components that they're struggling with as far as affordability is housing and those who have children, childcare. 37% of New Yorkers' income is going to housing. And we know that that is a price that keeps rising. And unfortunately, too, the middle class in New York is really covering the majority of what taxpayers are paying. So it's becoming less and less feasible to afford a place to live, but then the tax burden is falling on this middle class that's dwindling. And so you'll see some of the candidates are leaning toward like, well, how do we make housing more affordable? Like we know Mandani, for example, wants to freeze rent stabilization rents. And I think Eric Adams has, kind of proposed that he is going to increase the number of affordable housing access and like literally build new housing. And so that's going to be, to me, a critical component of this election.
Ralph, what about in terms of public safety? Because this has been a big issue. You know, the statistics say one thing, the way people are feeling in a lot of the polls about how safe things are is a little bit different. It doesn't exactly jive with it. What's your view on how big an issue this is for us?
Well, it's a very big issue. I mean, by and large, people want to feel safe on the subway and they want to feel safe in their neighborhoods. And of course, crime statistics say one thing, and what the general perception of crime is on the street is another. The question is, do people feel safer in their neighborhoods? Now, each mayoral candidate has a plan for that, and most of those plans are tied to money. One of the great things about politics is that stump speeches are not sworn testimony. So you can say anything you want on a stump speech about adding cops or retaining cops. The proof is going to be in the pudding. Can you add more numbers to the police department? Can you stop the police department hemorrhaging talent like they're doing now? And how are you going to do that? How are you going to make the job more attractive when overall recruitment is down almost 60% in the country? And so they have a tall order. There's a tall order in front of them in order to shore up the ranks and stop people from retiring. A lot of it has to do with anti-police sentiment, and all of it is tied to money.
There's much more to come. Stay with us.
I do think this election was more about affordability, as maybe compared to 2021 when Mayor Eric Adams ran. He ran basically on a public safety platform.
Joe, with the rise of Mandani, that was a thing that a lot of people did not see coming. And he seems to be shifting a lot of his positions, you know, with every passing week. How do you see that playing with voters?
Well, I mean, I think you saw the proof is in the pudding with the primary election results. You know, I think, as we were talking about before, some of the top issues, I think public safety is up there. But I do think this election was more about affordability, as maybe compared to 2021 when Mayor Eric Adams ran. He ran basically on a public safety platform.
Right.
And I think that message resonated a lot with New Yorkers at the time. But now I think people are looking for answers to the affordability question. And so I think the assembly member, you know, was very effective in his campaign. He had sort of a few very clear, simple promises he's making to voters that I think were very effective. His past comments about defunding the police, for example, he says it doesn't reflect his current thinking. And I think for his campaign, that's something you have to do. I think people tend to run to the right or the left in a primary, tack back to the center in a general, because a general election electorate has a lot more independents that could potentially vote for a Democrat. And so I do think it's a more moderate group of people who are going to be weighing in November.
Tiffany, give us a sense, because you look at the budgets and things from a national perspective, and also, you know, for us for the show, you know, the New York perspective. Are the New York numbers kind of out of whack or just very different from what we see nationally?
Yes. So, I mean, ideally for housing, you really don't want to spend over 30% of your overall cost toward housing, but New Yorkers are at 37%. Childcare is higher in New York. About 25% of income for families with children is going toward that. So you're looking at like over half of your income going to housing and childcare. But not just that, there's also taxes, right? That New Yorkers over-index on property tax and income tax. This is why you see people like wealthy folks fleeing to places that don't have federal tax, like Texas or Florida. And so you're losing folks who would normally pay taxes to those states. And so, yes, they over-index in almost all things, you know, and it's becoming almost unaffordable to live in New York. I've just been following this election as a New Jersey person, that's why affordability is the number one thing folks are asking about, like where we live, how we make sure our kids are okay. Utilities are up. It's literally down nationally, utility costs, but it's up in New York. And so these are some of the things like, we're just surpassing national averages.
Ralph, in terms of the law enforcement, you know, that with the police department in particular, and the law enforcement officers that are out there in uniform and doing the job, what about affordability for them? Because there's a lot of talk about the salaries.
Well, the New York City Police Department, their unions have always taken some grief about parity, that surrounding police departments get paid more. Now, it used to be so enticing to work for the biggest police department in the country that cops would overlook that. They wanted to stay, they wanted advancement. We don't see that now. You see brand new rookies. I've never seen this before. Brand new rookies getting out of the academy. They are already shopping to outside towns, villages, and states where the pay is comparable, but the quality of life is a lot better, the cost of living is down, and they're appreciated. Don't forget, for cops, yes, affordability. I mean, cops have kids and need childcare, just like Tiffany was saying, but also for cops, job satisfaction is a lot of it, right? How are they perceived by the public? So they want to go someplace where the pay is on par, where they're going to be more appreciated, the cost of living is going down. You always lost a little bit to outside departments, but you never saw this movement of people getting out of the police academy, young men and women already shopping. North Carolina, Florida, Tennessee, they all have their antenna up to move somewhere else.
Tiffany, the struggle, is there any kind of a breaking point where people go, it's just too expensive. I don't care if we have to uproot the kids, move away from the family, and just not stress every single day about if I spend $5, I'm going to blow the budget.
No, absolutely. Anybody who can address those things, and to Joe's point, yes, some of the big promises are not just about cutting back, but I wonder, for example, this rent stabilization. So if you freeze rent, but the owner of that building, the expenses are not frozen. And so those are raising a little over 6% annually. And so if your rent stays frozen, but I have to pay more insurance, more fuel cost, more for utilities, then how does that work? Are we just talking for talking's sake? That this is some of the questions to ask. Like, is that realistic that you can say, well, your rent will never go up for the next however many years? You want a candidate that can actually get things done. We know you can't do all the things, but realistically, this is what I'd be thinking if I would be voting as a New Yorker. Realistically, how can they affect my day-to-day realistic life?
Ralph, what role does money play in policing? What role does the budget play and the amount of money that can be allotted to the police department play in terms of public safety?
Well, the NYPD has an insanely high budget. It's around like $3 billion or something like that. So, it's the biggest police department in the world. And any of these programs that you want to do are going to be tethered directly to money. It's about moving around chess pieces. Are you really hiring more cops? Can you redeploy them? I mean, we see, plain and simple, Jessica Tisch emptying out these administrative spots where you have thousands of cops in these administrative roles where you could pay civilians less and have the cops go back on the streets. Now, what we see about Mandani was when he was saying, he wants to take police out of psychiatric type of radio runs where somebody on the other side of the door, right, mental health crises. That sounds great, but that is an artful way. Let's put it that way. That is an artful way of saying that you are going to defund the police. It's defunding the police without actually saying it.
Okay,
Right?
let me ask Joe. Let me ask Joe about that, because Joe, he spoke. Mamdani spoke recently at Columbia University School of Journalism. He kind of walked back the defunding thing when he was pressed during the questioning, and he said, "I would keep the current levels." Defunding was an old comment, but Joe, in terms of how important, are we making too much of that phrase "defund the police" in the media, or is this something we should really be paying attention to?
Well, I think, when he said it before, I think he meant it quite literally. So I do think he wanted to decrease the budget. This was really a conversation that probably reached its peak in 2020 around the protests surrounding George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And so, yeah, I think, a lot of people really took him at his word when he said that, and I think rightfully so. And I think him running now,
Joe, you tell me, right? Because you're the political mind here. Defund the police as a slogan is a loser. Even Democrats agree.
Well, I think what Ralph is saying is, I mean, you're seeing the product of that. I think people all around the country have recognized that that's not a winning slogan in even a Democratic primary.
Right.
And so you even see the farthest left candidate in a primary in New York, which is a deep blue city, and even this person is walking away from that rhetoric. I just think, we're in such a different political climate than we were in 2020 and 2021. you don't have to look any further than a member of the DSA disavowing defund the police to realize it's not something voters are into.
Not accurate what the polls are showing.
No, I think the polls are quite accurate. I think he has historic low polling. And I think for him, it's been a steady drumbeat of bad news, bad headlines, really kind of self-inflicted in a lot of ways. He's gone through four police commissioners. It's really quite incredible. And the mayor and some of his top deputies were really trying to run the police department from City Hall. And I think you've had other aides as recently as in the last week or two being indicted by the Manhattan DA. And then you had the mayor himself with a federal criminal bribery case. It was ultimately dismissed, of course, but I think the connection between the mayor and the President Donald Trump and the White House, I think, has also left a bad taste in a lot of voters' mouths here. I think, again, New York City is just overwhelmingly Democratic, and the president is not popular here. So I think all of these things have just snowballed into, this downward inertia that I think is extremely hard and probably impossible to change at this point.
What about the overall theme that a lot of people say that it's really about Mandani is this: people just want change. Like they know the other candidates, they've been around for a long time, they know them. Tiffany, what about that feeling of change, especially because the financial stuff I think is really important? Do you sense that at all? Like people just want it to be different.
I think that the last, 4 to 8 years have been really decisive politically. And the general sense I'm getting is that the vast majority of people are tired of the vitriol. We kind of are like, remember the days when politicians actually used to be like people that we hired to do things for us? And it becomes like literally not about the people. It just becomes about kings and queens fighting amongst themselves. And I think that in general, people are starting to realize that wait, these are people that we have hired that are supposed to do things to make our lives better, easier, smoother. And that is not the case. You're fighting just for fighting's sake, and to what end? And I think that just in general, politically overall, we're going to see a shift toward enough. That if you are not going to be here for the benefit of the people, that we're not going to allow you to be here.
Right, and that's going to be a whole thing. Ralph, we don't hear that term public service too much.
No, we don't. I was just listening to what Tiffany was saying. I could not agree more. You remember, we're all old enough to remember when Democrats and Republicans wanted almost the same things. We just had different ways of going about it. The two parties had different ways of going about it. Now, the siloing and the tribalism is so bad that we oppose just for the sake of opposing.
Joe, I'm going to give you the final word on this. There's been a lot of talk about outside influence. Do you think New York voters will really be the ones that determine, or do you think it's going to be, there will be influence, a lot of influence coming from outside that actually makes a difference?
I think there's two very remarkable things. One is the level of outside influence. We had around $30 million pumped into the primary to support Andrew Cuomo. But the other surprising thing is how ineffective it's been. It really made almost no difference. And the efforts to woo the mayor out of the race, he can't get his name off the ballot. Jim Walden just tried to get his name off the ballot after formally suspending his campaign, and the Board of Elections said, I'm sorry, it's too late. So the idea that the mayor could even do this, maybe in spirit he could stop campaigning, let's say theoretically, but he's also polling at 9%. And I don't think that's enough votes, even if you were to parcel them out, to boost Andrew Cuomo enough to make him competitive. I mean, Curtis Sliwa is currently getting around 15% of the vote. And he might, get more. Republicans typically get around 30% of the vote in general elections. So I think the outside influence really is it's not doing it. I don't think it's really moving the needle at all. And I think the polls are pretty accurately reflecting where voters are right now.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers on New York City election issues. You can watch it again and share it on our Fox 5 NY YouTube page and the Fox Local app. Remember, use your mind. It's your best weapon. I'm Lisa Evers. Let's push for peace, love, and justice for all.